Have you ever known you needed to make a change and then you spent months, maybe even years, just not making it? I definitely have. And one of the biggest examples in my own life was leaving my previous company. Now, eventually, I made the change. I left. I moved on. Everything worked out great. But if I'm being honest, I probably waited a lot longer than I needed to. I spent a lot of time carrying stress that I didn't need to carry. I spent a lot of time worrying about things that never happened. And looking back, I think I know why. I was experiencing something psychologists call loss aversion. And once you understand this concept, you'll start seeing it everywhere. In your own life, other people's lives, everywhere. Loss aversion is the idea that humans tend to feel the pain of losing something more strongly than the pleasure of gaining something. In fact, one of the foundational ideas in behavioral economics is that losing something is psychologically about twice as painful as gaining something similar is pleasurable. And I'll tell you what, that explains a lot about human behavior. Because when I was thinking about leaving my old company, I wasn't spending most of my time thinking about what I could gain. I was thinking about what I could lose. What if the new opportunity didn't work out? What if I wasn't good enough? What if I left everything I built? What about all the successes I've had? What about all the relationships? What about all the good times? My brain kept creating these scenarios where I was losing something valuable. And the funny thing is, most of those scenarios never happened. But they felt real. That's what a loss aversion does. It causes us to hyper-focus on what we might lose, while completely misunderstanding what we might gain. And I think that's why so many people stay in situations where they already know aren't ideal. Not because they love where they are, but because they're afraid of what happens if they leave. They're afraid of losing comfort, losing certainty, losing familiarity, even when those things aren't serving them anymore. Because human beings are incredibly biased towards what they know. What we're familiar with feels safer, even when it's not actually better. And once you start noticing this, you see it everywhere. You see it in careers. You see it in relationships. You see it in businesses. And you even see it in marketing. Think about customers for a second. A lot of buying decisions aren't really about what someone gains. It may seem like that on the surface, but you have to dig deeper and you'll find it. They're about what they're afraid of losing. Maybe they're afraid of falling behind. Maybe they're afraid of missing out. Maybe they're afraid of making the wrong decisions. Good marketers understand this. Bad marketers abuse it. And there's a difference. The first thing a lot of inexperienced marketers do when they hear about loss aversion is immediately start thinking about scarcity tactics. Things like last chance, only 5 left, offer expires tonight. And sure, those things, they can work sometimes. But that's not really the lesson. The lesson isn't that people are afraid of losing discounts. The lesson is that people are afraid of losing things that matter to them. Status, security, belonging, opportunity, time, confidence, progress. The best marketers don't manufacture fear. They understand existing fear. That is a very different thing. And hey, businesses struggle with a loss aversion too. Sometimes entire companies get stuck because they're afraid to let go of strategies that aren't working anymore. A team could spend months building something, maybe even years. And because so much effort went into it, nobody wants to admit it isn't working. So they keep going. Not because it's succeeding, but because walking away feels like losing. I've seen this happen in marketing all the time. A campaign isn't working, a channel isn't working, a whole strategy isn't working. But people keep pouring energy into it because they're afraid that changing course somehow means they failed. When in reality, failure is often where growth starts. And I think that's one of the biggest costs of loss aversion. It keeps us stuck. Because every time we focus exclusively on what we're losing, we stop paying attention to what's possible. We stop paying attention to growth. We stop paying attention to the opportunities and to the future. And that's dangerous. Because stagnation rarely looks dangerous while you're in it. It usually feels comfortable. It feels safe. It feels familiar. But over time, stagnation becomes its own kind of loss. Now, this doesn't mean you should constantly chase new things. There are core principles that matter. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's wrong. There are things in marketing, and branding, and business that absolutely deserve consistency. I talk about that all the time. Repetition builds trust. Check out my other videos if you want to see about that. But when something clearly isn't working, loss aversion can convince you to keep protecting the past instead of building the future. And I think that's something every marketer should understand. Not because it affects customers, because it affects us. It affects our decisions, our careers, our businesses. It affects our willingness to take action. So if there's one thing I'd leave you with, it's this. The next time you're resisting a decision, ask yourself a simple question. Am I evaluating the opportunity, or am I just protecting myself from loss? Because those are two very different things. And sometimes the thing standing between you and growth isn't a lack of opportunity. It's the fear of letting go of what you already have. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching and getting to the end. I hope you found it insightful and helpful. And I hope to see you next week. Until then, have a good one.